What? I have been nothing but welcoming toward you since the day you moved in, and you have done nothing in return but disrespect me. You think you can just keep turning me down as though I'm nobody in this community. If you refuse to go on a date with me, I will push every fine on your account straight into foreclosure. I will make certain your furniture is out on the street before the month ends. I have the authority to do that, and I will. This Homeowners Association president, Victoria Bain, had spent 3 weeks being unusually attentive toward the new homeowner at 29 Halcyon Ridge Court, stopping by with welcome gifts, suggesting they catch a movie together, and then asking him for coffee once he politely turned down her first invitation. And when he told her, the second time around, that he respected her position but simply held no romantic feelings toward her, she told him he had made a serious mistake and walked off. The violation notices began arriving the very next Monday. What she failed to realize was that the homeowner had documented every advance she'd made before the fines started, that 2 neighbors had witnessed the confrontation in which she told him he couldn't simply turn her down, and that the harassment and abuse of authority case his attorney filed would remove her from the board and follow her name permanently. Alfred Harper, 34, a structural engineer working for a mid-sized construction firm based out of Tampa, had closed on his home at 29 Halcyon Ridge Court in the Cedarbrook subdivision of Wesley Chapel, Florida 6 weeks before any of this began. Cedarbrook sat within Pasco County, a middle-class neighborhood built of matching brick homes, palm-lined streets, and the kind of community where people kept their properties well-maintained and their hours reasonable. Alfred had bought this home as his first property after years spent renting apartments, and had moved in wanting nothing more than a quiet place to return to after long days on job sites. He was installing weather stripping along his front door one Saturday morning when Victoria Bain introduced herself. She was 54, sharply dressed, and carried herself with the easy authority of someone who had been the most important person in a small space for a long time. She welcomed him warmly, handed over a gift bag containing a candle and a copy of the HOA guidelines, and told him her door was always open if he needed anything. Alfred thanked her sincerely and returned to his weather stripping. He thought nothing of it. She came back the following Saturday carrying a plate of cookies and stayed 20 minutes on his porch, chatting about the neighborhood. Then she returned the Wednesday after that. Alfred began to notice she was stopping by his property far more than any other house along Halcyon Ridge Court, and that her manner toward him carried a warmth beyond anything a standard HOA welcome would call for. Other neighbors had mentioned her, here and there. Words like difficult and controlling came up more than once, yet toward Alfred she remained nothing but pleasant, and he chose to take that at face value. Then she invited him to see a movie with her. She framed it casually, though the meaning was unmistakable. Alfred paused, set down the glass he was holding, and told her as gently as he could that he appreciated the gesture, but wasn't in a place for that kind of thing right now. Victoria smiled, said she understood, and left. The street settled back into quiet, and Alfred assumed that was the end of it. It was not the end of it. Before we continue, tell us what city or country you're watching from. Drop it in the comments below. We love seeing where all of you are tuning in from. And if you believe no position of authority should ever be used to pressure someone into a personal relationship, hit that like button, subscribe, and stay with us here on HOA Unhinged. 2 weeks after the movie invitation, Victoria came back. She knocked on Alfred's door one Sunday afternoon, and when he answered, she suggested they grab coffee that week. Somewhere low-key, just the 2 of them, nothing formal. Alfred looked at her, and this time he chose to be far more direct. He told her plainly he didn't see her in a romantic light, that he valued a good relationship with both his neighbors and the HOA, but had no interest in pursuing anything personal with her, and hoped she could respect that. Victoria's expression shifted. Not dramatically, no raised voice or slammed door, just a subtle change behind her eyes that anyone paying attention would notice. She told him she wasn't the kind of woman who got turned down within her own community. She told him he had made a serious mistake, and that he'd understand that soon enough. Then she walked off his porch and across Halcyon Ridge Court without ever looking back. The first violation notice landed in his mailbox that following Monday morning. It cited grass height exceeding the Cedarbrook HOA maximum along his front border, a measurement Victoria had apparently taken herself over the weekend. Alfred went outside immediately with a tape measure and recorded his own readings across 5 separate points along the border. Every reading came in well under the permitted height. He photographed each measurement, photographed the notice itself, and filed both away. The second notice arrived 3 days after that. A parking infraction citing his vehicle as sitting too close to the edge of his driveway under Section 4.3 of the Cedarbrook Guidelines. Alfred pulled up Section 4.3 that same evening and discovered it covered only guest parking within common areas and said absolutely nothing about private driveways. He filed it away too. Across the following 3 weeks, 8 more notices arrived at 29 Halcyon Ridge Court. Noise complaints leveled against a man who lived alone and kept his music at a volume his own neighbors had never once mentioned. An exterior modification citation for a doormat she had already approved for every other resident on the street. A landscaping violation for a bush that had stayed the same size since the day he'd moved in. The fines ranged anywhere from $150 to $750 apiece, and the total piled against his deed eventually climbed past $6,000. Alfred paid none of it. Instead, he went back through his phone and dug up the text messages Victoria had sent between her 2 visits. Messages that read warm and personal and had nothing at all to do with HOA business. He lined them up against the dates of the violation notices, and the pattern became immediate and unmistakable. Every fine had arrived within days of a rejection. The connection needed no further interpretation. He phoned an attorney that Friday and brought everything with him. The folder, the text messages, the full timeline, and the names of 2 neighbors who'd been standing outside when Victoria told him he had made a serious mistake. Alfred's attorney, a civil litigation specialist named Patricia Oy based out of Tampa, reviewed everything he'd brought in and told him this case carried 3 distinct legal layers, all of them serious. The first was straightforward HOA harassment, fabricated violation notices with zero bylaw basis, issued in a clearly documented pattern following personal rejections. The second was abuse of institutional authority, using an HOA presidency itself as a coercion tool to pressure a resident into a personal relationship. The third proved the most significant. The foreclosure threat Victoria had sent in a text message 10 days after the coffee rejection, telling Alfred his unpaid balance was approaching lien territory, and that she held the full authority of the board to pursue his property, met the legal definition of coercion under Florida Statute 784.048 and gave the case a criminal dimension reaching well beyond a standard HOA dispute. Patricia filed the civil lawsuit in Pasco County Circuit Court on a Tuesday morning. The filing ran 38 pages and was precise. It listed every violation notice by date, cross-referenced each against the rejection it had followed, included the complete text message exchange between Victoria and Alfred, and attached sworn statements from both neighbors who witnessed the confrontation on High-End Ridge Court, in which Victoria told Alfred he had made a serious mistake. The filing described a clear and documented pattern of retaliatory enforcement, used as a mechanism of personal coercion, and asked the court to declare every fine unenforceable, award damages for the harassment, and refer the coercion element to the Pasco County District Attorney's Office for criminal review. The HOA board received their own copy of the filing the same day as Victoria. 3 members read it that evening and called an emergency session for the following morning. During that session, one board member asked to review the text messages Patricia had attached as exhibits. The room went quiet as they were passed around. Nobody defended Victoria. Nobody asked to hear her side of it. They had already read it in her own words. Victoria Bain hired a defense attorney by the end of that week. The retainer alone cost her $22,000. The Pasco County Circuit Court ultimately ruled in Alfred Harper's favor on every count. Every violation notice Victoria had filed against 29 High-End Ridge Court was declared unenforceable, and the full accumulated balance of $6,000 in fabricated fines was dismissed entirely. The court found a clear pattern of retaliatory enforcement directly tied to Alfred's rejection of Victoria's personal advances, and entered that finding into the public record of Pasco County Circuit Court, where it would remain permanently attached to her name. The damages awarded to Alfred covered his full legal fees, plus compensation for the sustained harassment and the documented emotional and financial strain of the campaign Victoria had waged against his property. The coercion element Patricia had flagged in her original filing was referred onward to the Pasco County District Attorney's Office as requested, and a criminal investigation was formally opened against Victoria under Florida Statute 784.048. That investigation added a layer of consequence her civil attorney had no real ability to manage or contain. The Cedarbrook HOA board removed Victoria from the presidency that very same day the judgment came down, unanimously and entirely without debate. They commissioned a full independent audit of every enforcement action she had taken throughout her tenure. And the audit uncovered 7 other residents who had received disproportionate and unsupported violation notices during her time on the board. 3 of them went on to file their own legal actions in the months that followed, using Patricia Oway's original filing as a working template. Victoria's legal fees across the civil case, the criminal investigation, and the audit proceedings together consumed everything she had saved across 9 years of living in Cedarbrook. She listed her home on the market 8 months after the judgment and left Wesley Chapel without making any announcement to anyone on High-End Ridge Court. Alfred Harper answered his door on a quiet Saturday morning to find nothing unusual waiting. No violation notices, no uninvited visitors, no text messages from anyone carrying a lanyard and a clipboard. He made himself coffee, sat on his porch, and enjoyed the kind of peaceful morning a man deserves in a home he worked genuinely hard to earn. If this story reminded you that a title is never a license, and that a position of authority was never meant to serve as personal leverage over another human being, share this video with someone who truly needs to hear it today. And if you have your own story about an HOA president who crossed lines that had nothing whatsoever to do with community standards, drop it in the comments below. Every single story deserves to be told. See you next time right here on HOA Unhinged.